Martin, how are things?
Fine.
Coming up, Christ the King, and John 18, 33 to 39 is the Gospel.
Yeah, 33, 38, yes.
33 to 38, is it?
Yeah.
So, what do you make of, what about this Christ the King festival?
So
what is this all about?
I used to be the vicar of a church in East London, in the Isle of Dogs, that celebrated its patronal for one of the churches, its patronal festival on Christ the King. It was Christ Church. So,
Christ Church, yeah.
We used this, and I think we always had a bit of ambivalence in a sense about what was really what it really meant. And then when you look at the origin of the feast, so it's the Pope in 1925 introduced the feast, and it was introduced for two main reasons. One, because he was concerned about society becoming secular, and therefore there was almost a sense of asserting that Christ was the King of the full title is Christ the King of the Universe, that Christ is the King. And secondly, as a political assertion, because he was battling with the Italian authorities as following the reunification of Italy, battling with the Italian authorities. This had been going on from the middle of the 19th century, about political control over the Papal States. And eventually it was resolved in 1929 when the Vatican retained control of Vatican City, but nothing else. But at this point it was still very much in contention. So there is this sort of strangely political context for the origin of the feast. And what do we have in this story? We've got Jesus refuting the political dimension. So Pilate's asking him the question, and he asks the same question in all the four Gospels. Are you the King of the Jews? And in John, the Greek, and I'm not sure about the other Gospels, but certainly in John, the Greek for you has an emphasis. So it's almost a kind of incredulous, are you the King of the Jews? So you get a sense that Pilate knows something about what Jesus is about and is perplexed by this question. And you've got, John portrays Pilate as this figure who's really trying to get Jesus off. And Jesus replies, refuting that the political dimension to this, and presumably the term had been around. It was certainly around when we were reading Maccabees, was the Hasmonean Empire, and that title was around, and presumably it was around as a continuing aspiration for the political Messiah, to call the King of the Jews. So you've got this title around, and Pilate clearly sees that because there was no resistance at Jesus's arrest, this was not a politically motivated cause that Jesus was embodying. And so Jesus then it gives this equivocal response, you called me so. And that equivocation seems to reflect then that actually Jesus is not wanting to talk in terms of kingship. He will talk in terms of kingdom, but he really wants to talk in terms of what does that mean, and it's about truth. And so as you can imagine, trying to celebrating this feast, and all the gospel stories inevitably for the feast through the 3-year cycle are stories of Jesus's humility and apolitical or non-political response, which isn't to say that Jesus's agenda doesn't, and clearly does have, socially transforming consequences. but it's not bound up with the political systems of its time.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm just airing my perplexity, I think, really. But you've, as you always do, been thinking about what's truth.
Well, yeah, this is the famous statement, isn't it, in this passage from Pilate? What is truth?
Yeah, although we don't quite get there in the passage.
No, and that's why...
Frustratingly.
Yeah, but I think we do need to get there in terms of our understanding of what's going on. And it's a very contemporary question, really, because we get our knickers in a twist a lot about truth and, living in, quotes, post-truth days, and in philosophy, the difficulties people have with issues of truth and the such like. But arguably, it's pretty simple as an idea, truth. I mean, an idea or a statement is true if what it says is as things are. Does the idea match the reality? To say snow is white, well, is snow white? Yes-ish. So it's kind of true. And children know what truth is. They don't have to be taught or lectured. If I promise a child something and don't deliver on my promise, the child knows that I have been untruthful. And no child appears to ever need to be educated into lying either. They seem to kind of like instinctually understand how to manipulate truth. But these days we've got all of these complexities by, for instance, saying, well, that's true for you. And what's true for me is this. But that isn't really, I don't think, about truth. That's about belief, if you see what I mean. So,
belief or preference. Even.
Yeah, and truth is what you bump into, for instance, when you're wrong. For instance, I couldn't say to you, well, it's true for me that my keys are on the kitchen table. Because you'd say, well, let's go and look on the kitchen table. And if they're not there, well, it's not true. I don't care if it's true for you. What you're saying is you believed they were there. And actually it wasn't. So there's something pretty straightforward, I want to argue, about truth a lot of the time that we need to get to. So when Pilate gets into this sophisticated philosophical reasoning about what is truth, what's going on there that he's missing? And I think it's really interesting the way in which Jesus has manufactured this to be a conversation about truth suddenly, rather than about the king or the kingdom. Because, Pilate has asked him straightforwardly, are you, as you say, are you the king? And he says, you say that I'm a king. For this reason I came into this world, to testify to the truth. All those who belong to the truth listen to my voice. And Pilate then says, what is truth? So Jesus has introduced the idea of truth. Why has he done that? And I think, as you say, there's something about Jesus here disavowing a political version of kingship or kingdom. And perhaps even thinking, if I start talking about kingdom with Pilate here, he's really going to get the wrong end of the stick. So what I'm going to do is talk about truth. But if you replace the word truth with kingdom in what Jesus says, you'd still get pretty much the same idea. You say that I'm a king. For this reason I came into the world, to testify to the kingdom. Those who belong to the kingdom, recognize me. And I think there's a very close connection between what Jesus is saying about truth and his kingdom here. And the reason I say that is because, as we said last time, what's the kingdom about? Having Jesus, the king, as your ruler, and therefore doing the things that the king says. And that's the kingdom. And that's exactly what Jesus talks about in relation to truth in John 8. He says, if you keep my words, you will be my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Well, again, you could argue that's like saying, if you work as citizens of the kingdom, doing my words, you will know the truth by actually the experience of so doing, and that will make you free. So for my money, what's going on here is this is another way in which Jesus is talking about the kingdom. And Pilate's question could as well have been, what is the kingdom? As it could have been, what is truth?
And we very clearly get a sense then that that what Jesus is talking about and what he's refuting here is that this is not about an exercise of power as in the sense of control. This is about power as in the sense of love. And therefore, when he's talking about my kingdom that is not of this world, he's talking about a kingdom that is a place of love, compassion, forgiveness, mercy, and a place of humility. And therefore, that's what that runs so counter to any notion that Pilate would have had.
Yeah, which is what, of course, Jesus has said just before this passage, which is saying, you know, my kingdom is not from here. It was from here. My followers would be fighting to prevent me from being handed over to the Jews.
Which they do not do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.